Greetings and welcome to Converging Streams, Interfaith Fellowship in Our Modern World. Our program is a production of the Muncie Interfaith Fellowship. This installment, Reflections on the Spiritual Power of Nonviolence, Part 2 of 3, features excerpts from a 2013 interview on Indianapolis radio station WICR for the program JourneysFire with host Richard Brendan discussing with Reverend George Wolfe his book, The Spiritual Power of Nonviolence. In this segment, we pick up with George Wolfe responding to the suggestion that, following the lead of Mohandas Gandhi and Martin Luther King, more people are seeing nonviolence as a spiritual path.
Well, when you have the experience of being attacked politically or otherwise, ridiculed and subjected to slander and so forth, and stand up against that, and through patience, through understanding, and by exposing the injustice so that you can muster a groundswell of support, going through that process makes you realize that nonviolence is a spiritual path. And this is what I talk about in, I'm not sure if it's the second or third chapter, but I talk about the Promethean fire, the fire of Prometheus, which is the Greek myth that Prometheus brought the fire to earth. Again, it's not literal fire, it's the fire that makes injustice visible. It's fire that exposes injustice. And when you experience that process of how injustice can be exposed, and then you gain this support of people or institutions or whatever to rally against that, and it all happens in a nonviolent way, you realize that nonviolence is a spiritual path. It makes you stronger. It tempers you.
Yes.
It creates a character, and it puts you in touch with an inner strength, which in Taoist philosophy is called qi. Qi is this inner strength, which is really the most powerful force, much more powerful than physical force. What Gandhi called soul force or satyagraha. And Martin Luther King used that expression, soul force, in his I Have a Dream speech in the earlier part of it that often is not recited, but nevertheless, you discover this strength, this power within, which is really far superior to anything a weapon can yield.
Yes. We talked about nonviolence as a spiritual path. You used a beautiful phrase, spiritual fire, something important that I think that people need to really appreciate and go through to really understand it more. And there's a quote in there I wanted to share with you and have you respond to. You said, while the persecution you endure may be psychological rather than physical, the blessing you receive from your fortitude is self-respect, strength of character, and the future admiration of those who lacked the courage to make themselves heard. Can you speak to that when you wrote that in your book?
Well, yes. I mean, you again, we're talking about a kind of a long-term benefit. When you deal with the concept of conflict resolution and approaching it from a nonviolent point of view, and from exercising compassion and finding the deep love within you, which enables you to have the patience to let go of your anger and witness that transformation process, so that it becomes a positive energy. We're not talking about instant gratification here. We're talking about a slow long-term process which builds character over time. And if you look at the successful nonviolent movements in the United States, again, because of our First Amendment, and prior to that, down back in colonial times, we really have a proud history of nonviolent activism. And those transformations in our society brought about either by the women's rights movement, the labor movement, civil rights movement, United Farm Workers movement, I mean, all those that go back, they take time. It's not. It requires patience. It's not something that comes in an instant or quickly. And what lures people into violence often is the impatience and the fear of the anger within themselves. And so the statement I made there is really something which you experience, but it's again a long-term gratification, not a short-term gratification.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it also speaks to the inner work, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But first, I was really fascinated to learn about somewhat the dance that sometimes politicians have with these activists. And you had a short section about Lyndon Johnson in 1964 and his alignment really with Martin Luther King. He was looking at Goldwater, who was taking a hard stand, and that was his political opponent. But also Malcolm X was out there at the time, too, really preaching violence.
Martin Luther King worked himself into a position, or placed himself in a position where it was to Lyndon Johnson's advantage to support him.
Yeah,
and that's the key behind successful activism. You don't look at this as a zero-sum game where one side wins and the other side loses. You create a circumstance where you can point out how both sides can benefit. Mm-hmm. And that is the honorable way that appeals to the collective conscience of the people, the moral conscience of the people. And that's what Martin Luther King did, and that's what Lyndon Johnson tuned into. Now, I think he tuned into it. I think Lyndon Johnson tuned into it in a genuine way. I mean, I think he had a genuine feeling within him that civil rights was virtuous and important, and that we would needed to pursue that. But King kind of helped him by I think creating a situation where the alternative wasn't really very attractive.
Yeah. I was intrigued by the quote. I'd never heard this before from Winston Churchill, who was expressing it all the way back in 1921 concerning Gandhi. He said, "It amazes me that Gandhi should be allowed to go undermining our position month after month and year after year."
And this is really the creative spiritual aspect of nonviolence, and again, Gandhi was very clear in saying that nonviolence is not passive, and we can see that if we look at his strategies in India and also the strategies used by Martin Luther King and his followers in the civil rights movement and in labor movement and so forth. We can see, this nonviolence is not something which is passive. Nonviolence is something which is active, but it's active in a way that approaches the problem in a constructive way, not a destructive, violent way. And Gandhi was a real genius at that, and these ideas come out of the epiphany I'm talking about. When you reflect on your anger and allow that energy to transform itself into a more positive direction, it seems like the worse the anger, the more gripping the anger on yourself, the more powerful and insightful will be the epiphany.
Yeah,
and the result that occurs. Now, a great illustration of that is Gandhi's decision to march to the sea and make salt. Very
salt
simple
march, yes.
Kind of thing, which you would think, how could that have any impact? And yet it had a tremendous impact. And that all came out of that process of allowing the anger to be transformed into a positive insight. This is really kind of, it's if you look at hemispheric brain theory, it's kind of right brain versus left brain. Those insights come out of our faculties that are associated with the right brain, faculty of intuition, insight, realizations, as opposed to logical, kind of rational, political, legalistic approaches. And politicians, you talk about politicians. Politicians are caught up often in kind of legalistic, rational arguments, and there's all sorts of pressures on politicians to act before the time is right. We saw that not long ago when Netanyahu came over to visit Obama, and he was trying to pressure him. Now was the time to bomb Iran and so forth, and the temptation was there to do that. And there was also political pressures on Obama from this side to do the same thing, and he had the wisdom to realize that the impact of that would be highly disadvantageous to us in a variety of ways, not only politically but economically and so forth. And you saw the same thing too when North Korea had an attack on an island in South Korea, and there was all sorts of call to go to to get revenge against the North Koreans, and Obama wisely tempered that. And but there's also the pressures on politicians to act and to take a kind of rational, legalistic, and act too quickly. Whereas the epiphanies that bring about the nonviolent, positive, constructive transformations really come from the other side of the brain, really come from the intuition, the faculties associated with insight and realization.
On today's program, we're talking about the spiritual power of nonviolence with author George W. Wolfe. I love that title because it reminds, I think, all of us what is sorely needed in activism today. When we're talking about King and Gandhi, Mandela, so many others that we could also put into that camp, we're talking about this amazing inner strength. I've always called it the need for the dance of inner work of heart with outer service in the world. It reminds me of something in your book. You talk about the various definitions of peace, one of them being inner peace. And I think that's crucial, that those of us who do want to be a voice in this world, that we are about also cultivating that inner peace as well.
Yes, you could say it starts with the individual and within the individual, and the conflict that I was talking about, this transformation of anger into a positive energy. That's really an inner conflict that we have to deal with and be patient with. But the spiritual practices such as what Thomas Merton called interior prayer,
yes,
and what we call meditation, contemplative types of inner states of reflection are really crucial to allowing that transformative process to take place. And when we do that, one of the great theologians that spoke about nonviolence in the context of Christianity was Walter Wink. And Walter Wink had this concept of the enemy's gift. He called it the enemy's gift. If we have the patience and the awareness to step back and look at a conflict in a broader context, we're going to see that the conflict is really providing us with opportunities. We get blinded to those opportunities when we get wrapped up in anger and aggression against and revenge against what has been done to us. But if we can step back and perceive the conflict free from that, then we will find that there will be opportunities there that will be presented, and that those opportunities will be a very positive contribution. This happened to me when I was attacked by David Horowitz and his conservative group,
yes,
for teaching nonviolence at the beginning. When I was teaching a course in nonviolence at the beginning of the Iraq War, and so they were claiming that I was supporting terrorism and so forth. And I talk about that, and that's why I'm one of the 101 most dangerous academics in America for teaching courses in
I would be very proud of that, my friend.
But so the one of the enemy's gifts, so to speak, was all the opportunities I had to begin speaking about peace education, and I managed to write down the lectures and so forth, and ultimately that's what became the book. I put them all together in a way and elaborated on them more deeply, of course, and ultimately the book is a part of the enemy's gift.
Thank you for listening to Converging Streams, Interfaith Fellowship in Our Modern World. Our program is a production of the Muncie Interfaith Fellowship and is supported by our community. We thank you, our listeners and followers, for your support. To connect with Converging Streams, including listening to our entire catalog of past programs, getting our latest new content, and making your own contribution to this program, visit our website, convergingstreams.org. Converging Streams is produced by Tony Piazza and George Wolfe. Thank you for listening and have a pleasant week.